Mark Regev, the Israeli government spokesman who's on television all the time giving apologetics, he said publicly, of course, on British television where he was asked, he said he agreed, yeah, all rocket firing had stopped. So you want to stop rocket firing? Agree to the truce. Well, that went on, it was June 2008, went on until November of 2008. In November, Israel invaded the Gaza Strip, killed half a dozen Hamas activists, then rocket fire started, both directions. Everyone who was killed was Palestinian, of course. Hamas offered to reinstitute the truce. The Israeli cabinet considered the offer. We know this from Israeli sources. They considered the offer and rejected it because they wanted to use violence. And then comes Operation Cast Lead to invade Gaza on the pretext that they have to stop the rocket firing. Now, there's a lot of debate about was the attack on Gaza disproportionate and so on. It's all beside the point. You cannot use force in self-defense unless you've exhausted peaceful means. And in this case, they refuse even to try peaceful means. Presumably because the U.S. and Israel has every reason to believe they'd work, and then you wouldn't be able to use force. But all the discussion about this is kind of like off the wall. It's in some other universe. And that's approximately 100%. And it's about the same in Europe, I'm sorry to say, which tails along behind the United States on this. And the same is true about the flotilla. There is no justification whatsoever on grounds of self-defense, since they have peaceful means to defend themselves, except the ceasefire. Okay, so the whole thing is completely without any justification.
We live in a mentally challenged world because of the media that you've so well described over the years, making it impossible to sort things out very clearly. And our groups here, we function in a kind of like a huge umbrella of progressive groups that are trying, whether it's Haiti or Palestine, to make the people suffer a little bit less. That seems to be maximum goal. Just not to really be able to possibly change anything, but just maybe a little less suffering. This recent incident with Helen Thomas saying something which is outrageous for everyone to hear. The fact that she says these people were settlers, they came from Poland, and God bless them, the Holocaust. But the Holocaust was a white colonialist world phenomenon. It was and for the complicity that the white world, which was the top world, felt for this, they gave this partition of British protectorate Palestine this kind of a deal. And the major mankind, which is made up of non-white people, they've never bought that idea. Is it beneficial to go back into
history,
like we did?
So.
And how could we do more than just progressives trying to make people hurt a little bit less?
There's a lot of things we can do. We can't go out and start organizing steel workers because we don't work in steel plants. Okay, so you can do work where you are. You can't do work where you aren't. Well, a lot of us live in, educated, some academic, some professional communities, and there's a lot that can be done there. One of the things that can be done is to compel ourselves to recognize history. If you give up history, you've lost the basis for doing lots of important things. Haiti's a perfect example. If we could get to the point of recognizing the history, we could see the kinds of things that we ought to do and we're capable of doing. And that's across the board. You mentioned the Holocaust, maybe the most hideous destruction in history. But it's not the only case of mass genocide. Let's take us right here. We live here because the indigenous population was exterminated. That's the word that was used by the founding fathers. They're that hapless race of North Americans that were exterminated by the most perfidious cruelty. That's us, you know. Do we accept it? Well, you can read the New York Review of Books, for example, you know, the left liberal, the most important left liberal intellectual journal in the world, and you can read an article there about a year ago, which says that when, by a good, decent, leftish commentator, which says that when Columbus arrived in the Western Hemisphere, he found an empty continent with maybe 1 million people wandering around, the kind of hunter-gatherers, you know, so there was basically no one here. Well, you know, he's off by maybe 100 million. And they had advanced societies, pretty much like the Europeans, except in the means of destruction. There wasn't, I waited to see, there was not one single letter that appeared to say, wait a minute, you're off by 100 million, you know. And it was mass genocide, you know. Well, okay, if the history can be erased to that extent, we're not going to be able to face the problems that exist. I just came down this morning on a train from Boston, and I happened to be reading a journal, Diplomatic History. That's, of all the international scholarly journals on international affairs, that's the one that's most open, you know, has most critical and so on. All right, this issue happened to be devoted to the Vietnam War. So I read through the issue, and you know, some interesting work on it here and there, a lot of scholarship, plenty of footnotes. There's just one thing missing. There is not one word saying that there might have been something wrong about invading another country, killing 4 million people, destroying a couple other countries on the side. The closest it came to that was saying, well, maybe it was a mistake. Okay, if that's recent history, you know, which many of us were involved in, but history has been reappropriated by the conquerors, by the imperial culture, and prettified so that we're protected from it. Well, you know, if we allow our own communities to protect themselves from the actual history, there isn't going to be much in the way of constructive actions. So yeah, I think history is important, and it's a battleground. It shouldn't be conceded.
About 10,000 people were at a demonstration, and they began to burn these seeds that Monsanto is forcing on them, which are you remember these kind of seeds that they don't reproduce, they're genetically modified, they can blow over into the DR. So this is a horror show. The peasant movements to look toward food sovereignty and reconstructing the agriculture in Haiti.
You're absolutely right. I'm glad you brought that up. I mean, this, you know, it's Monsanto, but the U.S. government is behind it, which means we can do a lot about it. And what it is just as you say, it's a way of ensuring that Haitian farmers are captive. These seeds do not reproduce. I mean, apart from the fact that they may, you know, spread around, destroy other things, the farmers themselves cannot use the seeds the next season. They have to go back to Monsanto to purchase the seeds and purchase the fancy fertilizers and so on. So it's kind of like destroying the pigs. You know, it's another way of capturing the agricultural population, making sure they can't reconstitute a decent life. And it's being done by, you know, advanced technology, your taxes, my taxes, and so on. And the idea of organizing to send them real seeds, that's really important, and that's something very constructive that can be done. But also there's an educational aspect to it, as you pointed out.